Welcome to the Lawless Astrology channel. My name is Dabney and I'm an evolutionary astrologer. Today I'm going to be talking to Afefe Tayambo. Is that how you say it?
Tahemba. Close. It was
Tayamba.
close. It was good. Tahemba.
Tayamba. She's with Touched by Tarot and she's a tarot reader. And many people come to my channel, found me through Susan Lin, and Afefe often collaborates with Susan. They're good friends and they teach classes together. So I thought, well, actually, Susan was like, you two need to do something together. And I was like, that sounds great. So we both agreed. So welcome, Afefe. It's lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much, Dabney. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. And like you said, we both have that connection with Susan, and she never misses. Like, she's such a great resource. And the way that she can pair people and see energies, I knew that it was just a matter of time before we connected. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and I definitely watch. Afefe has a YouTube channel where she does tarot readings, and she will do some political work often and kind of give you a pulse on what the oracle has to say about where things are headed. So that's really always very interesting. So I highly recommend you check out her channel. She is available for readings. She's on social media. So all that information will be below. Her website is trulytouchedbytarot.com. And then all of her social handles are just Touched by Tarot.
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
yeah. So when I went to Afefe's homepage on her website, I was reading her bio and I found out she was a journalist at one point. And that really speaks to me because I've had a 25-year public relations career. So I'm not a journalist, but I play one on TV. There's definitely kind of like tarot and astrology, there's a symbiotic relationship. There's a lot that they have in common. A lot of my friends throughout the years have been journalists. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about your background as a journalist?
Well, I will tell you it to this day, and I've been out of the business now for about 20 years. But to this day, you can take the girl out of the newsroom, but you can never take the newsroom out of the girl. And so it's amazing how, especially and maybe your viewers feel the same way, as we go through life and we continue to discover these new aspects of ourselves, there are still those parts of us that are just central, that are just part of our core. And so my background in journalism, even as I'm in now this spiritual space, and most immediately prior, I was working as a paralegal in a law firm. So everything that I do, though, I find that somehow it's informed by my desire for information, my desire for truth, my willingness to do research, to want to find answers for myself. I wrote mostly for liberal rags. So some of your viewers may be familiar with papers like, say, years ago was really hot in, I didn't write for them, but I wrote for their parent company, the Village Voice out of New York.
Yeah.
Papers like that, where we had the liberty to really do, we were talking about this before we started taping, investigative journalism. And so the days of, back then, 90s, early 2000s, I would have the opportunity to take, Dabney, 2 to 3 months and work on a story if that's what I needed to do to really get everything that I needed to, especially if it was a cover story. So I fell in love with stories and blending what people perceived as issues, or what was relevant at the time, to what was really real in people's lives and how they were living those truths. So that's how I approached journalism, and that's how I approach my work even today, where I say very often on my channel, I introduce myself and I let people know that I have that background because I'm very grounded in my approach to spiritual readings, but at the same time, I try to, let myself go and get with the woo woo, so I can let my intuitive side loose. It's a lot of fun.
I love that. That's that I resonate so much with that. And that's why I think it is sort of heartbreaking to it's interesting you said about you left about 20 years ago in my career. I was just getting warmed up. So I've been doing PR for 25 years, and so I've seen the degradation of journalism over that 20 years, and a rapid acceleration after the pandemic, where, when I first started my career, everything was fact checked. If you did something, yeah, and you didn't there wasn't an expectation, well, I need 10 stories. It was like, oh, you got two really great stories, but they were deep dives, they were thoughtful, they were intelligent. And there was a fact checker. There was someone to make sure that everything that was put in that story was accurate. And so kind of the first thing that fell was the fact checking. And I noticed that fell off, and then social media entered the realm. And so it really, the internet in general was the thing that began the degradation, right? And that's around the time that you said, I'm out.
Yeah.
Or like kind of like around the time social media was kind of coming into play, because until that time there was still a way that more traditional mainstream media could still make money. People were still subscribing and getting the paper. People were still watching the nightly news. CNN was still far less tabloid. And as time went on, social media became the thing. And so it meant that you had to be more sensational.
Yes.
There was fewer budgets because there was less advertising. So there was mass layoffs. And so then, and people were, as we were talking about, everyone was freelancing. There were,
Yes.
was very few people who had a beat, which is what I used to work with, is like, if you had a client, you would talk to the beat reporter to report on it.
Mhm.
So anyway, just sort of explaining how we got to this point for people who are not like really embedded in this. And then the corporatization was kind of the final piece of the puzzle that happened during COVID, and after, where there was mass layoffs, and there was, much more of a corporate narrative that had to be imbued, to the point where, in 2016, I remember having an argument with my MAGA cousin and saying, I work with these people. They are good people. They are not liars. They are, it's not fake news. Like, and to the point where now I have more questions because of what's happened since 2016, and how much this administration has had a role in people distrusting
Yes.
institutions. So there are, like you said, if you wanted to you brought up a really good point about the fact there are still really good journalists who are trying, even in the face of all of this headwinds.
Well, and also we have, for some reason, as you were speaking just now, Dabney, I had the thought about, say, people like Mark Elias of the Democracy Docket. Now, he's an attorney by trade, right? His organization is an organization, but he is also in the realm of publishing, I think it's daily, if not a couple of times daily, um, um, Substack letter, and I'm on his email list. So he's doing journalism in addition to, his role as this lead attorney for Democracy Matters. So this is our media. Our media has sort of, transformed. And that is also a part of my point of people fighting the good fight, but they're not the traditional beat reporters, to your point. People like, I didn't have a traditional beat. I wasn't with a mainstream paper. I was more with liberal papers. We talked about that. But the avenues are wider. And I think for as much as we are seeing news being co-opted by this administration, I do believe that even if it's not coming out of traditional publications, we do also have lots of entities, Midas Touch, another network, right? That's taken off. So we have a lot of networks that are out there that are delivering, I think, to the best of their ability, accurate, factual, timely news. It's just coming at us now from, there was a day when we could just all sit and open up our New York Times or our LA Times and say, this is our go-to source. for basically all of our news, and we just don't have that luxury anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we no longer have Dan Rather and Peter Jennings, but to your point, and this is an astrology piece that I want to bring in, is that Uranus has moved into Gemini, and that is going to further accelerate the change of the media, because I believe that the traditional media that we have been used to, has collapsed, to be honest with you. But to your point, there's been so much upstart media that is new, that has taken its place. Like, I'm a big Bulwark fan. And so there's so many Substacks. So Substack has really stepped in to play the role of bringing back that investigative journalism, and there is still like really great bastions, like ProPublica is on my donation list. There's a man named Jed Legum with the information, I forget what it's called exactly, but anyway, he does really good investigative work that then trickles out to the mainstream media, because they don't have the resources or the budget any longer, or the will and desire, because it's not clickbait.
Right.
So so
Absolutely.
yeah. So do you have any sort of, so if that's where I think it's going to. So that sounds like that's your intuition, and where you feel like we are headed with our media currently is just more the upstarts, Uranus and Gemini, Neptune and Aries, like individuals taking the mantle.
Absolutely, absolutely. But also within that realm, as individuals take up the mantle, there are collectives that form out of those individuals, right? You have podcasts, people who are doing what we do right here. You host someone, you bring someone in. So I forget his name, Tim, with the Bulwark. I
Tim
love
Miller.
Tim Miller. So Tim Miller, as we know, is also a regular contributor to MSNBC. It's on
Right.
there all the time. So we have certain of these individual people who are at least part of the fabric of existing outlets, and they're being brought in as a part of a larger collective. So I think we're going to see more of that as well, because at some point it becomes unmanageable. If our only ability to understand what's happening is I've got to take 3 hours out of my day and check what 12 different people who I like have had to say, like, what are we doing with our lives, right? It's
Right.
not, I don't think that's sustainable. I think that the doors that are being opened for these different sources, individual sources, are still going to be filtered through some sort of, whether it's mainstream. Again, MSNBC has been doing a fairly decent job, at least some of its hosts, of maintaining, bringing in people and hosting people who are pretty regular, pretty frequent. So I think we're going to continue to see more of that. And
Yeah. Well, and I think that we haven't seen the full evolution of it, right? I mean, and also we have to think about some of the origins of journalism was lone upstarts, right? Like, we didn't get to, Walter Cronkite was everybody's, like source for everything, but it evolves, and suddenly CNN broke onto the scene with 24-hour news networks, and then Fox came and's done its business. So I think the right wing media has been really perfected for their audience. They've had quite the head start. And I
Mhm.
think we're playing catch up, but I think that we're playing catch up really quickly. And I'm really happy that that's happening. So then there's this new evolution. It's kind of like streaming. When we all of a sudden got streaming, it was so exciting to have Netflix and then Hulu and what, but then it's like overwhelming. And so then you don't want all that, because it's just noise. And so then the cream rises to the top. So I think that's a little of what you're saying, is like there will be kind of a centralization again.
I think there will be, and you raise a really good point, Dabney, in terms of that contrast between right-wing media and sort of because this doesn't necessarily have to be liberal per se, but non-extreme right-wing. But I also think that's because the job of the other media has been tougher, because the myopic view of what we would typically describe as, let's say, a Fox News diehard is pretty narrow. You know, the parameters of that, you can tick off a few things and say, okay, we got it, you know, whether it's being a Christian evangelical or whatever.
Right.
But
Of a
you know,
certain age, right.
age and a certain demographic and a certain geographic, okay. But I think the opposite of that is not true. We are this amalgamation racially, economically, geographically, geopolitically. So the appeal to that broader audience, and those numbers are bigger, are larger, if I would argue. There are more of us, collectively us, than there are of the Fox
Mhm.
News, MAGA, blah. So I think the you know, what has to be done to capture those audiences and filter the information to those audiences is more difficult, which I think is what made room for, say, a CNN and an MSNBC,
Right.
or other, you know, other outlets as well.
Yeah.
So it's all good.
Well, so we sort of talked a little bit about the marriage between PR and journalism. So let's talk about the marriage between astrology and tarot.
Yeah,
So you want to give some thoughts there on how you feel like those two go nicely together.
I will tell you, um, for the longest time, before I started reading tarot professionally, I was just so determined that I need to wrap my head around like 78 doggone cards. Okay, let's start with that. Like it's not like it's a handful. It's a friggin' right? And if you want to do a decent job and you want to, you know, you want to, even if you're just doing personal readings for yourself, but you still want to feel like you're getting some answers to your questions, like you kind of sort of plugged in and know what you're talking about. So
Right.
for the longest time, I was so just trying to wrap my head around the cards themselves, the history around tarot, what these traditional meanings were, that you mentioned a lot in terms of media that changed after COVID. COVID did wonders for the metaphysical industry, period. And in particular, tarot. Why? Because people were searching for answers, people had time on their hands. And so I began to do more of a deep dive into different ways to approach tarot. And in many, many more modern decks, not just since, I would say since the early 2000, mid 2000s, and certainly since COVID, a lot of the more modern decks, creatives started incorporating astrological symbols. I don't have a deck in front of me right now that has that, but you'll notice even in a lot of tarot decks now, you'll see astrological symbols. Some of them will even put, you know, a sign, a sun sign or something on those cards. So from the perspective of what goes into reading tarot, astrology has certainly in recent years become more explained and more you know, more a part of. It's almost expected now, I think, that you incorporate astrology into tarot because there's a natural plug. And that for me, once I got my head around that, man, did my readings get better, because for everything that I may not have understood about a major arcana card, if you told me that that major arcana card, say I'm a Capricorn, represented in the major arcana by the devil, whose idea that was, it was not mine. But but the point is, so there are things, if you know certain attributes of the sign Capricorn, it helps give you a little more texture and a little more, you know, depth to understanding. Okay, the devil may be around being goal oriented, maybe too ambitious, maybe a little greed, maybe a little short sighted, can't see the forest for the trees, etc. So I have thoroughly, I am by no means an astrologer. I leave that to the experts like you. But my appreciation of astrology and my knowledge of it, certainly as it relates to tarot, has grown tremendously.
That's so interesting that you said that about Capricorn and the Devil card. I'm a Cancer, and I remember when I found out the Chariot is
Mhm.
the major arcana that's associated with that. It felt like I was like, what? I don't understand that. But to your point, it brought out a certain richness when I actually dug into the chariot, which has to do with tenacity.
Mhm.
And it has to do with, that sort of ferocity of going into battle. Even, and it's not the hand-to-hand combat. You're on a chariot. Yeah.
Those pinchers going, if somebody messes with my family, I bet you I'm gonna
Yeah.
get a hold of it.
Yeah, and cancers are a cardinal sign, which we don't like change. We don't like our boat rocked. And then once it's apparent that our boat has been rocked, we are gonna, like the crab or the chariot, we're gonna get to work. Like we're gonna, we've got a shell and we know how to make it work. So that's an interesting point that you bring up. So, how did you get it started with learning those 78 cards then? That's, for people who are interested in actually giving tarot readings.
So my introduction was a little different. I was undergoing initiation into a Wiccan coven where I eventually reached the rank of high priestess.
Ooh.
And while I was undergoing that process, I actually had a divination done for me by a priestess who just sort of stopped mid-sentence while she was reading her, casting her shells and reading for me. And she was Spanish. And so there was a language barrier. We had somebody interpreting for us, but she kept talking about, she kept waving and gesturing to cards. And I was like, what is she talking about? And she said, you were meant to read cards. She didn't call them tarot. She just said you are meant to read cards. And so after that, while I was in a metaphysical shop, I just started exploring these cards and God brought my first deck. Reformed Christian, mind you. So I'm tripping out. Like this was an absolute no. You don't, you don't do all this. But I just felt drawn to it. And a lot of it, I'm a firm believer in even though I teach tarot classes, I have a book that I've written on tarot. Um, I I believe that tarot really has to be self-taught. You can learn the concepts, you can learn spreads, you can get tips on what can make it easier for you, things like that. But it's almost like a relationship. And that is my approach to tarot. And it's how I approach it in my book. I believe, Dabney, that you use this. It is not as exact a science as, say, perhaps people might consider astrology to be. There's a lot of fluidity and flexibility there, and your ability to get comfortable. You can sit and memorize meanings all day long, but your ability to get comfortable with interpreting the meanings behind what you're seeing is very much an individual process. And it took me years. It took
Yeah.
me, I've been reading tarot 30, what was 95? And this is so that would be 30 years.
Mm-hmm. 30
Exactly,
years.
25. But I've only been professionally, I launched my channel and been reading professionally like the last 5 years.
Yeah. Amazing. I think that's such a good point because I get asked that too, about astrology and, like what makes a good astrologer. And to some degree, it's really a calling, like you have to, it's, and also, astrology is not an exact science like tarot. So you have to have a lot of faith and trust that the person that you are getting your information from is really, we are oracles. Like we're mirroring back what's in them, right?
Right, right. I love
I
that.
mean, we're, like that, they come to us for answers, but I'm a firm believer that we all have the answers within us. We're just helping to mirror it back, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. And I
Yeah,
think the best teachers are those of us who are able to guide and help unlock that door, help people unlock their own doors and see what's already there.
right.
And I think that's really what happened for me is I had people who encouraged me. I had people, many of those years I'd read for friends and things and they go, oh, you should do this. You're really good at it and you should do this. But none of that was going to work until I I got there for myself, till I knew I was ready.
Right.
And it never,
Yeah.
you know.
And I've had lots of tarot readings, and also, there are charlatans in both astrology and tarot. I remember early on when I was a very young impressionable girl getting like a palm reading and tarot reading, and them telling me I had a curse on me and I had to bring them $50 or $100 tomorrow to lift the curse, right? So if anyone ever does that, please run quickly. If an astrologer ever tells you that this is what's going to happen, run quickly, because we all do have our own choices. It's just energy, and what we're mirroring back is your energy, and how you can get to a higher place. So one of the things that's on my mind, would you be willing to pull a few cards, Afefe? Okay, so one of the things that's on my mind for the people who are watching this is we have come through a big year. We have had a lot of changes. If you follow all the astrology, there's been a lot of changes in the outer planets. Everything's been flipped over to kind of this new world, this new reality. But in the fall, we're going to be going through a process through the winter of these outer planets, except for Pluto, going back into the signs that they were in. So Neptune will be going back into Pisces, and Saturn will be going back into Pisces, and Uranus will be going back into Taurus. So to me, from an astrological point of view, there's some cleanup going on this fall where we have an opportunity to fix some of the things that have been really kind of in our face the past few months and accelerating. But by the time we get to, the winter of 2026 and into the spring of 2026, we've really locked in from an astrological standpoint. These planets are there, and it's what we're going to deal with. So I would love for you to pick a few cards for this period about what we can learn while we have a chance to clean up some of this, or what you see. Does that make sense?
It does. Um, this is interesting. So the first card that I pulled was the World, is the World card, and it's ruled by Saturn. Try to get my focus going there. There we go. That's a little better.
Ooh, cool
Ruled
deck.
by Saturn. Typically, when we see this card, it indicates times of completion.
Mhm.
But based on what you just said, Dabney, that makes me, so we have planets that went into retrograde, and then they're going to come back out, and they're going to start moving again, right? If I heard.
So, actually, no, they're forward right now, but they're retrograde now, and
Mhm.
they're going back to where we were for a little bit and completing. And then it's in the spring is when things move forward for good. So it's a
Okay,
completion.
perfect. That's a beautiful correlation, because that's what, well, if I could just get my focus there you go. That's
Okay.
what the world is. The world is about completion. It is about where things have taken their natural course to a point where it's like, okay, now I'm ready to turn the page. Turning the page being sort of relevant to what you're saying about next spring, where now all of these astrological shifts have occurred, and we are ready to actually buy the spring. Because one of the most frustrating things, I'm sure you've encountered it as an astrologer, I certainly have in my work, is people have been so frustrated with the just this feeling of one step forward, three steps back, just not feeling, every time there's feels like there's some momentum or clarity or light at the end of the tunnel, boom, it gets snatched back, and there's three other things so there's still this sense of completion. And I think in terms of retrograde energy, that's one reason why we're in that, because whatever your divination tool is, we're all under the same influence one way or another. And there are aspects, there's still information we're getting about how many of us have really had to think this deeply about what a democracy really is
Right.
in recent right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think this world is speaking to, is a completion. And what came with the world is what's called the temperance card. So two major
Ooh,
arcana showed up.
oh, that's good.
All right, exactly. Temperance being ruled by Jupiter and Sagittarius, but also a card of moderation. Temperance is retrograde and forward movement, a resolution from what both of those things meant. It is where you take sometimes what can feel like two very opposing things. How do I make progress when everything is in this retrograde motion? Like, are the two canceling each other out? And temperance comes to say, no, what they're doing is alchemizing what we're going through, our mindset, our emotional state, the solutions that we're coming up with, this rise now that we're seeing in more acceptance around progressives, looking at what happened with, say, someone like Mamdani out of New York, right?
Mhm.
Knocked everybody for a loop, but we will see more of that in this temperance energy because this is where things blend. It's no longer black and white. It's no longer this or that. It's no longer hardcore liberal or rabid conservative. It's this that's coming together. Temperance very much reflects that. And the third card that I pulled is the Prince of Swords. So this is a new energy. This
Okay.
is a new dialogue. This is a new opening that I think that we're going to see that gives us a different framework for how we think about our own lives, our own relationships, our own purpose, mission in the world, and certainly giving us some different context for how to like a framework for what's happening to us in the world, rather than just saying, hey, it's all going to hell in a handbasket, you know, that sort of thing. It gives us this is a fresh look.
Yes, and the Prince of Swords, swords are warriors, right? I mean,
Swords can
or
be warriors. Swords can also be a little zip 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 zip, like you know
range.
here,
Okay.
there, here, there, here, there, yes, no, maybe, a little all over the place. But that has to happen in order to come out on the other end of it and say, okay, there are four different ways of looking at something and having a discussion about look at where the Democratic Party, for instance, is right now. You've got the traditional faction with the progressive faction, with the middle of the road, kind of centrist faction. So Prince of Swords says there's all of these voices that are going to blend, and out of those will emerge something new.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, it's interesting when you said the world is ruled by Saturn and temperance rules Jupiter.
Mhm.
So by whole sign during this time, Saturn will be in Pisces and Jupiter in Cancer. There's going to be a trine between Saturn and Jupiter by whole sign, not necessarily degree. But that is that a trine blends nicely. And so, the world and temperance does give you this sense, maybe there is this completion, but there is maybe a tempering of what's happening because this has been this huge acceleration, and for many of us, a very jarring, right? Like it's like this is, but there is a completion of what we all knew, and I think the structures that we believed in, the everything that we knew is coming to an end, and I think there's maybe this understanding that we're not going back.
Absolutely.
Finally, like there is no normal ever again. And so instead of trying to go back to what we thought was normal, maybe that's that Prince of Swords, right?
That's right. That's right.
Some fresh energy. And I already see in myself, in my most recent argument with my MAGA cousin. I don't have many MAGA in my life. I've really tried to separate myself because it's exhausting. But I do see a little bit more movement on both sides. Um, you know, Definitely not in agreement yet, but maybe a widening of perspectives to recognize that it's not us versus them. It's bottom versus top. It's kind of like he said, so this was something I said in 2016 to him, and he didn't resonate with it, but he just said it to me, not remembering I had said it to him in 2016, was that they're trying to separate us. The people in power are trying to separate us.
Yeah. How about that?
And so the fact that he could even get to that point and recognize it's not the libtards that are ruining the world,
Yeah.
so maybe that's a little of that.
There's a lot of that, Dabney, and I think thank you for illustrating that on a very personal level in your own life. And I think that's there's a ripple effect, and that's being replicated in many of our lives, whether it's in our families, in the workplace, however we're experiencing it in our communities, those of us blue dots living in red states, etc. But that's happening. But I also think what you said is really powerful in that everybody's waking up.
Yeah.
Dems are waking up to the fact that as much as we love, or many of us may have loved Kamala Harris, voted for her, and perhaps even still believe to this day that something happened with those voting machines and she in fact got it. There is also an awakening and recognition, I think, and owning up to the fact that she didn't have time to put together an adequate enough platform to address economic issues. So the whole, we want to be free, we want to maintain justice, we want the ideals on the one hand, and then you have a lot of people, like your family on the other hand, waking up and realizing, hey, everybody over there is not crazy, and our guy, and our folks are not necessarily doing what we thought they were going to do either. Like what's happening right now is what nobody bargained for. How that translates, going back to that temperance card then, of blending these still different viewpoints into something that causes less separation, where we recognize.
And yes, I love that. And I hope that that's where we are headed this fall. I hope that there is that more of that understanding. So it sounds like that's really our work and our opportunity. I mean, I definitely am seeing, I think I was a die in the wall Democrat for so many years, volunteering, donating money. And now I've registered as an independent because I see a lot more clearly where, and this is what I said to my cousin was, I think many Dems sold us out. I think all the Republicans sold us out. So, I have to look at that big picture and relativity, but there's a reason I don't want to be a part of the Democratic Party anymore, because I did see where I felt that they enabled what ended up happening and what we are going through now.
And there, going back to media, I don't know what stories you've been seeing, but I have seen a number of stories in recent weeks, especially among Latinos, and I'm in South Florida. So,
Okay.
there's a lot of coverage around the fact that even with all of this dissatisfaction, even with everything, the horrors of immigration and people being snatched or disappeared, that these same families, and many of whom voted, the other way, are not ready to vote Democratic. They've said, we don't like this, but we're not liking that either still. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think that goes back to that Prince of Swords energy that we saw, the world energy that we saw, some of what you elaborated with the continued movement of the planets. There's still recognition that we're going to have around change and the need for change. And we just cannot. You registering as an independent, secret, so am I. And because I have very strong feelings around being labeled with something that I may not.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, it's not hitting all my buttons right now.
Yeah.
Yes, principles and values for sure. But the way
Yeah.
it's being played out, the way we still have folks like the Chuck Schumer and all who are absolutely refusing to budge and make room for new blood when the new blood is our only hope. Yeah.
Right. I mean, my rap is in his 70s and has cancer and just ran again. And we've already seen this year multiple Democrats in the House dying because of old age, because people, they didn't make room for the next generation. They're not making room. They're not refusing. And yet they still are operating under an old paradigm of writing strongly worded letters. So, which is doing nothing, which is, and the old paradigm for the last, unfortunately, 4 years was our opportunity to prevent all the destruction that's happening now. So something new had to have happened then, or now it's going to happen a different way. And unfortunately, it's a lot bumpier.
It's going to be a lot easier, and there's going to have to be a stronger insistence on that sort of change. Because we're also seeing, now that I mentioned Chuck Schumer, I also have to mention his House counterpart, Hakeem Jeffries, who younger, yes, but
Old paradigm.
mold, right, following that paradigm, trained to do so, and just, and still on that gravy train because he's got his eyes set on the speakership. And so he's trying to, fill that role. So to your point, I think there is no way out. We have to come to grips, the world in that poll, we have to come to grips with the fact that this will not, if we're really serious about making some waves in 2026, that won't do it.
No. And that is unfortunately what you hear time and again from people who couldn't vote for Kamala. Do I believe race and gender played a role? Of course. Do I believe lies played a role? Of course. And there was not this dramatic platform shift that people were crying for. And I agree she didn't have time. I agree. I personally do hold Joe Biden accountable for a lot of what ended up happening. Yeah.
No argument here.
Yeah. Well, Afefe, this has been really interesting. Thank you for kind of giving us a little peek into what we can expect during these outer planet retrogrades and before we sort of lock into a new world that's coming in 2026. Anything else you wanted to add or?
No, this has been fascinating, Dami. I love your work. And as I said, one of the things that I love about doing this work and walking my path spiritually is that you never stop learning,
Yeah.
your mind. And this does go back into journalism. Like you're always curious. You're always like, what, when, what, there's always that desire to wrap your head around what's going on. And to the extent you can anticipate things, and I'm sure that this is something I'd like to touch on real briefly is, did you experience as an astrologer some of the same letdown that, say, tarot readers or other psychics felt around talking about that election? Because even astrologically, from what I understood, everything under the sun was pointing to a victory. Victory didn't happen. And I think that there are even, I'm saying, and bringing that up to say, and I'd love to hear your take on it, is I think we are, even those of us who are good at our craft, who are dedicated, who, am I allowed to curse?
Yes.
Okay, we know our shit.
Yeah.
And really are serious and dedicated and all of that, that we are still learning as these events are unfolding and as the cosmos in its infinite wisdom, things still happen. I think we're all, people like us included, are being challenged to continue to grow and learn and be flexible and be adaptable.
100%. Yeah, no, I definitely had predicted a Kamala win. And that's when I realized I'm not a predictive astrologer because at the end of the day, I can tell you the energy. I can tell you what, choices people have. But at the end of the day, people have choices. And
Yeah.
yeah, and so I do think that she would have struggled because the astrology is so challenging. It would have been a struggle. It would have been a very different kind of struggle. But I think what we're getting now is a rapid acceleration of destruction of everything we've held to believe was true about ourselves and our country. And when it's that, when it's that accelerated, when it's that dramatic, when it's that impactful, there is no choice but for change. And so there was a force of change, whether it was the first Black woman president or whether it was some orange cartoon character that has a wrecking ball and dementia, like either way, it was going to result in this kind of new civil war that we're feeling. And so it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening, but something new is being born. We just can't see it yet.
We can't see it yet. And I do believe that that new is going to be prompted by deep, fundamental internal changes. When you think about, there have been so many references to, say, civil rights movement, Jim Crow era, et cetera, like, his desire to go back to the Gilded Age and turn back the hands of time, right? So a lot of what we're seeing, it's not new to us. This is all refashioning and repurposing racism and things that have happened in the past. However, in the past, Dabney, we had movements, civil rights movement, women's movement, etc., women's lib. We had movements that were formed to address and try and promote that change. And yeah, that happened. This movement is you, me, boom, 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 millions and millions and this movement feels like it's more personal. And because we're realizing that structurally, putting all of our faith in an organization, in a quote unquote government, it's fallible.
Yeah. Human. Yeah. And so it is really very Shakespearean, so, right. Like so much of what we look at, if you look at historical patterns, like I think fell into the trap of thinking that it couldn't happen to us. And it does. So here we are. And I love what you said, like, it's you, it's me. One bit of good news that those Venezuelans that were locked away in the prison camp, they are back home in El Salvador. Not a happy ending, but shows the power. I don't think that would have happened had there not been such an outcry and by the people. So that's Pluto and Aquarius. Like we are going to make a difference, but this is a long game to reclaim the power that has been taken from us. And there's a lot of people that are lining up to fight for their power. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing your gift with us, and thanks for chatting with me. And please do check out Afefe's channel. It's really fun. You just got like a little flavor of it with her pulling some cards here, but I need to get a reading from you. So I need to sign up because I haven't had a tarot reading in a while. So, okay, everyone, I'm going to put Afefe's information before. Were you going to say something real quick?
I was just going to say thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Like I can tell we could just sit down, even if we weren't on camera, we could sit down over a meal and just go.
We'll just chat. So yeah, we'll bring Susan into it, and then we'll a couple of cocktails, and we've got a party. So I look forward to the day when all of Susan's people can come together on her channel and we can actually celebrate the demise of the current administration, which will happen at some point in our lifetimes, believe it or not. So I look forward to that day. I remember when he first got indicted, she like did a show and she had like poppers and stuff like that. It was funny. Okay, everyone, thank you for tuning in. As always, there's a reason and a season for it all, and the cosmos is conspiring to help you. So until next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.